Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing great today because we've got a ton of exciting stuff to talk about. Doom: The Dark Ages just got a brand new update, Update 2.2. And honestly, this one feels like one of those patches that really tightens the whole experience up in the best way possible. If you've been playing the game since launch, or even if you just jumped in recently, you're definitely going to notice some of the changes here. And don't worry, this isn't one of those tiny hotfix situations. There's actually a lot under the hood this time. So let's talk about what's changed, how it feels, and what you can expect when you load the game up after downloading this update. First off, let's talk about what might be the biggest headline from this patch. Steam Deck players, you finally got some love. Doom: The Dark Ages is now officially Steam Deck verified, which means you can take the Doomslayer's latest rampage on the go, and it actually feels good. Like, not just playable, but properly tuned for the deck. The update includes targeted handheld optimizations, and it's clear that ID Software and Bethesda really wanted to make sure the experience holds up no matter what you're playing on. The game automatically detects your device and adjusts the settings to give you the best balance between performance and visuals. That means if you're using something like ROG Ally, Legion Go, or one of the newer Z1 or Z2 chips, you'll get settings that push around 30 or even 60 FPS, depending on your model and power mode. And honestly, for a game that looks this incredible, getting that level of performance on a handheld is kind of wild. But it's not just about optimization. They actually did a bunch of quality of life improvements specifically for handheld players. There's now a handheld benchmark mode built into the game, so you can easily test your performance and tweak things before you start a mission. It also now automatically detects when you dock or undock your device, switching input modes seamlessly, which just makes the whole experience smoother. And let's be real. If you've ever tried to set up a big AAA shooter on a handheld and had to constantly mess with resolution and performance settings, you'll know how much of a time saver that is. This kind of thing really shows they're paying attention to how people are actually playing the game in 2025. Now, outside of the handheld stuff, the update packs a ton of gameplay fixes and improvements that affect everyone. One of the first things you'll notice if you've been grinding through the campaign again or doing challenge runs is that the combat flow feels just a bit cleaner and more stable. There's a specific tweak they made to something called the Brink of Death mechanic. It's that little system that gives you a brief window of survival when you're about to die. Players had noticed it felt slightly off since the last update, maybe a little too forgiving or inconsistent, and now they've tuned it closer to the original launch behavior. It's subtle, but if you play on higher difficulties like Nightmare, you'll feel it. The balance between risk and recovery feels tighter again. You can't just rely on that last second save anymore. You've really got to stay on top of your health and armor management like a true Slayer should. Another nice touch is that enemy attacks, especially from heavy units, have been rebalanced so they don't break your shield quite as aggressively on Nightmare. That doesn't mean things are easier, it's still Doom, but it feels a bit fairer now. Before, certain enemies could just melt through your defenses faster than you could react, and that threw off the rhythm of fights. Now it's more about timing your movement, making smart weapon swaps, and staying mobile. Basically, the way Doom should be played. On the bug fix side of things, there's a whole list of stuff that's been cleaned up. One issue that had been driving people crazy involved the shield throw ability interacting weirdly with plasma shield soldiers. Sometimes it could cause random crashes during power surge encounters. That's been fixed. Another weird one was with the BFC, that ridiculous gun that's like a portable nuke, where firing it during certain boss fights could cause the game to crash at phase transitions. That's gone now too. They also patched a bunch of mission-specific bugs, like enemies spawning in unreachable areas, or soft-locking the player in certain combat arenas. You can tell they've been combing through player reports and fine-tuning those small details that really affect how smooth the game feels. If you've been playing the campaign and noticed your kill or damage stats sometimes not tracking correctly, especially with the Accelerator Mastery Challenge, you'll be happy to know that's fixed too. The stat tracking is much more reliable now. You won't have those moments where you complete a tough fight, check your progression, and wonder why it didn't count. Everything's synced properly, and that makes progression challenges way less frustrating. One thing I really like about this patch is that it doesn't just focus on the technical side. They actually adjusted gameplay flow in a bunch of missions. For example, in Habeth and Sentinel Barracks, there were some sections where enemies would respawn infinitely if you triggered events in the wrong order. That's been fixed, so you won't be stuck wasting ammo on endless spawns. They've also cleaned up certain enemy AI behaviors in levels like Ancestral Forge and the Spire of Nerethal, making encounters more consistent and reducing those odd pauses or desyncs that sometimes happen mid-battle. It's those small things that make replays feel smoother and more rewarding, especially for completionists trying to max out every challenge and collectible. The visual side also got some love. There were cases where certain VFX wouldn't expire properly, like Prince Azrak's blood pillars lingering longer than they should, making the arena look chaotic even after the fight ended. That's been resolved. Overall, the update just feels like a big pass of polish across every level, every effect, and every encounter. Now, if you're on PC, there's something important to note. Bethesda recommends updating to the latest drivers, specifically NVIDIA 57640 or newer, or AMD 25.5.1 and above, to make sure you're getting optimal stability and performance with this patch. If you've been experiencing random stutters or GPU crashes, there's a good chance outdated drivers are the culprit. Once you're up to date, the game should run noticeably smoother, especially during heavy firefights, where particle effects and explosions are flying everywhere. And since we're talking about performance, I know a lot of you want to hear how the game runs now compared to before. From what people are reporting and testing, there's a clear bump in stability, particularly on mid-range rigs. Frame pacing feels steadier and the game handles dynamic resolution scaling better. On handhelds like the Steam Deck, most players are locking in around 30 frames per second at 720p, with stable frame times even in big combat zones. On more powerful handhelds like the ROG Ally X or Legion Go, you can push closer to 1080p and 60 FPS if you tweak power settings. It's impressive, considering Doom: The Dark Ages is an absolute visual monster, with some of the most detailed environments id Software has ever built. One of the quiet improvements they made, and it's not listed in flashy terms, is the loading optimization. If you notice that initial boot up taking forever or fast travel stuttering when moving between major zones, it's faster now. Asset streaming has been refined a bit, and level transitions feel more seamless. It's the kind of behind-the-scenes fix that doesn't get much attention in patch notes, but it's immediately noticeable when you play. Now, let's talk about the Ripatorium, because this place has had its fair share of issues since launch. In Update 2.2, they fixed the spawn logic for Vagaries, which were sometimes appearing in weird, blocked-off spots that made it impossible to finish waves. They now spawn only in valid open areas, so you can complete encounters properly without having to reset. They also fixed a rare crash on Xbox that could happen when swapping profiles mid-session, which might sound minor, but it was a real headache for people sharing consoles. All of this ties into something that's pretty cool about how Doom: The Dark Ages has been handled so far. id Software seems to be listening closely to feedback. They're not just patching bugs, they're actually adjusting balance and design elements based on how players are engaging with the game. You can see that with the way they've tuned the difficulty spikes, the way they've fixed certain boss mechanics, and even how they've adjusted weapon interactions. This isn't just maintenance, it's active evolution of the game's core experience. The update also reaffirms how seriously Bethesda is treating the handheld market. A few years ago, you couldn't imagine a AAA game like Doom running well on a handheld without massive compromises. Now they're not only optimizing it, but officially supporting and verifying it. The inclusion of a built-in benchmark mode and automatic setting detection is a really forward-thinking move. It's basically making the game self-adjusting, so players don't have to be technical experts to get the best experience. That's huge for accessibility and playability. So what's the takeaway here? Update 2.2 isn't about adding new content or flashy weapons. It's about refining everything that's already great about Doom: The Dark Ages. It makes the gameplay tighter, the performance more consistent, and the experience smoother across every platform. Whether you're slaying demons on a high-end PC rig or ripping through hordes on a Steam Deck, the game feels more polished than ever.